Chapter 1. The night she bled. The carriage accident should have killed her. Alara Ashford knew this with the same cold certainty she'd known every terrible thing in her life: her father's gambling debts, her stepmother's cruelty, the arranged marriage to Lord Pemberton that would have been a slow death in silk and pearls. She'd fled that fate 3 nights ago, carrying nothing but a stolen horse and the clothes on her back. Now the horse was dead in a ravine somewhere behind her, and she was bleeding into moss-covered stones at the edge of a forest that shouldn't exist. The maps hadn't shown these woods. The villagers in the last town 2 days' ride back had warned her against the northern road after sunset, but they'd used the vague, superstitious language of peasants. Shadows walk there, they'd said. The old families don't forgive trespassers. Alara pressed her hand against her side, where the carriage door's broken latch had torn through her dress and into flesh. Blood seeped, hot and persistent, between her fingers. Her vision swam. She'd survived her father's death. She'd survived the years of her stepmother's calculated neglect. She'd survived the humiliation of being paraded before Lord Pemberton like livestock at auction. She would not die alone in a forest because of a panicked horse and her own desperate flight, but as darkness crept into the edges of her sight, she wondered if survival had ever really been in her control at all. The sound came first: footsteps, measured and deliberate against the forest floor. Not the cautious tread of a traveler, but the confident stride of someone who owned the night. You're bleeding on protected ground. The voice was male, cultured, and utterly without warmth. Alara tried to lift her head, but the world tilted violently. She managed only to turn enough to see him, tall, dressed in black that seemed to drink the moonlight, with pale skin that made him look carved from marble. His eyes caught what little light filtered through the canopy, to bright, to sharp, the wrong color. Amber bleeding into gold. Not human eyes. I didn't, she coughed, tasted copper. I didn't know. He moved closer, and she realized he made no sound at all. No breath, no rustle of fabric, no displacement of air. He simply was where he chose to be, as if reality bent around him. Ignorance isn't an excuse. House Corvus accepts. He crouched beside her with inhuman grace, studying her wound with clinical detachment. You've lost too much blood. You'll be dead in minutes. Alara's hand tightened against her side. Then leave me. Something flickered across his perfect, terrible face. Is that what you want? I want. She closed her eyes. What did she want? Not this. Not Lord Pemberton's bed. Not her stepmother's poison. Smile. Not the empty years that had stretched before her like a prison sentence. I want to choose. Silence. Then, interesting, when she opened her eyes again, he'd tilted his head, regarding her the way a scholar might study a peculiar specimen. His hair was dark as pitch, falling past his collar in a style decades out of fashion. Everything about him seemed wrong, too still, too controlled, too present in a way that made the night itself feel like a stage. What's your name? He asked. Alara. The word came out on a dying breath. Alara Ashford. Well, Alara Ashford. He stood with fluid precision. You've given me a problem. House law states I cannot feed on trespassers without trial, but you'll die before I can take you before the court. And if you die here, your blood will poison this ground for a decade. Feed. The word lodged in her failing consciousness like a shard of ice. But she couldn't finish. Couldn't reconcile this elegant, dangerous man with the monsters from children's stories. Vampire, he supplied, inflectionless. Specifically, I'm Lucian Corvus, third of my house, and guardian of the western border you've so inconveniently bled upon. He knelt again, this time close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of his chest. No breath, no heartbeat, nothing but controlled power wrapped in a beautiful shell. I can save you, but there will be a debt. Alara's vision fractured into stars. Debt. She'd spent her whole life drowning in her father's debts, suffocating under obligations she hadn't chosen. What kind? Sanctuary. Until you heal. Your silence about what you've seen. His eyes held hers, and she saw something flicker behind the gold, something almost like curiosity. And your blood given freely, when I require it. That's insane. Impossible. A bargain with a monster. That's your only chance of seeing another sunrise. He lifted one pale hand. Decide quickly, Alara Ashford. I can hear your heartbeat slowing. She should refuse. Should let death take her rather than bind herself to something inhuman. But the alternative was Lord Pemberton's hands on her, her stepmother's triumph. The slow erosion of everything she might have been. At least this monster was honest about what he was. Save me, she whispered. Lucian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. You regret this. I already regret everything. Her hand fell away from her wound, strength finally failing. What's one more mistake? He moved then, faster than sight. She felt him lift her as if she weighed nothing, felt the shocking cold of his body against her dying warmth. The forest blurred around them, and she realized with distant shock that they were moving, not walking, but traveling with impossible speed through the trees. Stay awake, he commanded. If you die in transit, the dead is void. Alara laughed, which became a cough that sprayed blood across his immaculate black coat. Giving me incentive. I'm practical. But his arms tightened fractionally. We're almost there. The trees opened onto a structure that stole what little breath she had left, a manor house of dark stone and darker windows, rising from the forest floor like a crown of thorns. No lights burned in its windows. No smoke rose from its chimneys. It simply existed, ancient and patient, as if it had been waiting centuries for her arrival. Welcome, Lucian said softly, carrying her up steps worn smooth by time, to Thornhaven. Try not to bleed on the carpets. Then the great doors swung open on silent hinges, and darkness swallowed her whole. Chapter 2. The awakened Angela woke to the absence of pain. This was wrong. She should be screaming. The wound in her side had been deep enough to see bone, hot enough to feel her life pouring out with each pulse. Yet now, as consciousness dragged her up from velvet darkness, there was only a dull ache, distant, manageable, almost pleasant compared to the agony she remembered. She opened her eyes to a ceiling painted with stars, not metaphorical stars, actual constellations mapped in gold leaf and silver paint across black plaster, so detailed she could identify Orion's belt, the sweep of the Milky Way, configurations she'd studied in her father's library before the creditors had claimed his books. The artistry was breathtaking. The fact that she could see it in perfect clarity despite no visible light source was terrifying. You're awake. Good. I was beginning to wonder if I'd miscalculated. Alara jerked upright to fast, her head spinning, and immediately regretted it. The room tilted, then settled. She was in a bed. A massive four-poster affair with curtains the color of dried blood, sheets that felt like water against her skin. She wore a nightgown she didn't recognize, soft as cobwebs and clearly expensive. Someone had undressed her, cleaned her, bandaged her wound. Lucian Corvus stood by the window, or rather, by the heavy curtains that blocked whatever window lay behind them. He'd changed clothes, trading his blood-stained coat for a simple white shirt and dark trousers that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. Without the formal layers, she could see the predatory grace in every line of his body, the way he held himself with the coiled readiness of a blade. How long? Her voice came out rough, unused. 14 hours. He didn't turn from the curtains. It's currently 3 in the afternoon, which means I've been awake far longer than I prefer. You're welcome. 14 hours. Alara looked down at herself, pulled back the nightgown sleeve. Where the carriage had torn her skin, there was only smooth flesh marked by a thin red line. Not a fresh wound, not even a scab, a scar weeks old. What did you do to me? Saved your life. Now he did turn, and those impossible amber eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. My blood accelerates healing. A few drops mixed with wine while you were unconscious. Don't worry, it won't change you. The transformation requires far more than that, and mutual consent besides. The transformation. Alara's mind skittered away from that thought, focusing instead on immediate concerns. You said there would be a debt. I did. He moved toward her, and she had to force herself not to flinch. Sanctuary until you're strong enough to leave. Your silence about Thornhaven and its master. And your blood freely given when needed. He paused at the foot of the bed. I don't take without asking, Miss Ashford. That's house law. Consent or nothing. How? Civilized. The word tasted bitter. His lips curved, not quite a smile. We're not the monsters from your storybooks. Well, he reconsidered. We are. But we have rules. My house, at least. Others are less principled. There are others. It wasn't a question. 5 great houses control the territories of what you call England. Corvus, Valmont, Sanguine, Nocturne, and Ashencroft. We maintain our own domains, settle our own disputes, and pretend your human governments matter when it's convenient. He crossed his arms. You stumbled into Corvus land. If it had been Valmont who found you, you'd be dead. They don't negotiate with trespassers. Alara processed this, her scholar's mind automatically cataloging information despite the surreal circumstances. And you do? I'm curious about anomalies. His head tilted, bird-like. You were dying alone, fleeing something I could smell the fear on you days old. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet you chose survival over surrender. Why? The question landed like a blade between her ribs. Alara pulled the sheets higher, suddenly cold, despite the room's perfect temperature. That's personal. Everything about this situation is personal, Miss Ashford. You're in my home, healed by my blood, bound by debt to answer my call. I think I've earned a modicum of honesty. She wanted to refuse, wanted to gather whatever dignity she had left and demand he let her leave. But the scar on her side was still warm, and the memory of his voice in the forest beside quickly still echoed in her bones. I was engaged, she said finally, to a lord, a human lord. He's 63 years old, wealthy, and collects young wives the way other men collect hunting trophies. I would have been his fourth. She met Lucian's eyes, refusing to look away. His third wife died in childbirth last year. The second threw herself from a tower. The first simply vanished. But everyone speaks of Lord Pemberton with such respect. Silence. Lucian's expression hadn't changed, but something in the air shifted. So you ran, he said quietly. I ran. And I'd rather die in a forest than suffocate in silk for the rest of my life. She lifted her chin. Does that satisfy your curiosity? No, he moved closer, stopping at the bedside. This close, she could see the inhuman perfection of his features, no pores, no imperfections, skin like porcelain given breath. But it explains why you didn't scream when you saw what I was. You've already met human monsters. What's one more? I didn't say you were a monster, you thought it, but there was no accusation in his voice, only observation. You're not wrong. I've lived 347 years, Miss Ashford. I've done things that would turn your blood cold. I've killed. I've conquered. I've watched empires rise and fall like tides. He leaned down, close enough that she could see the ring of black around his golden irises. But I've never lied about what I am. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs loud enough. She realized with creeping horror that he could probably hear it. What happens now? She whispered. Lucian straightened, stepped back. Now, you rest. You heal fully. And tomorrow night, when I wake, you give me your first payment. His smile was knife-sharp. 3 drops of blood freely given. That's all I require. And after, we see if House Valmont has noticed a human trespasser on my land. If they have, he moved toward the door. Well, then things become complicated. He paused at the threshold, not looking back. Sleep while you can, Alara Ashford. The sun still protects you. But night falls eventually. The door closed with a whisper. The lock, she noticed, didn't turn. She was a prisoner who could walk away, a debtor who'd chosen her chains. Alara lay back against the pillows and stared at the painted stars, wondering which fate she'd truly escaped and which one she'd just embraced. Chapter 3. Questions in the dark night fell like a curtain dropping. Alara had been exploring the room, testing the door unlocked, examining the wardrobe filled with dresses in her size, which raised uncomfortable questions, studying the books on the shelf, poetry, philosophy, histories and languages she couldn't read. When she felt the change, the air grew heavier, colder, as if the house itself had been holding its breath, and finally exhaled. He was awake. She didn't know how she knew this, only that the knowledge settled into her bones with absolute certainty. Somewhere in Thornhaven's depths, Lucian Corvus had opened his eyes to darkness, and the manor had stirred with him. Alara stood by the window, watching true night claim the forest. She'd opened the curtains hours ago, desperate for natural light, for proof that the world beyond these walls still existed. The sunset had been extraordinary, violent reds and purples that seemed to bleed across the sky. Now only stars remained, cold and distant as the man who'd saved her life. The knock came softly. 3 precise raps. Come in, she said, pleased. Her voice didn't shake. Lucian entered, carrying a tray. This surprised her enough that she simply stared as he set it on the small table by the fireplace, a fireplace that now burned with flames she hadn't lit, casting dancing shadows across his pale features. You need to eat, he said. Human bodies are inconveniently fragile. You've lost blood, expended energy healing. If you faint during our transaction, it voids the agreement, ever practical. Elara moved to the table, examining the tray's contents. Bread still warm from the oven, cheese, sliced fruit, wine in a crystal glass. Simple fare, but prepared with care. Do you have servants? She hadn't seen anyone else. Hadn't heard footsteps or voices beyond her door. I prefer solitude. He settled into the chair opposite hers with that unnatural grace. I prepared this myself. Don't look so shocked, Miss Ashford. I've had 3 centuries to master domestic skills. I'm an excellent cook, though I haven't tasted food in 200 years. She picked up the bread, tore off a piece. That must be lonely. It's practical. Vampires who cling to human habits tend to go mad. Better to accept what you've become than mourn what you've lost. Elara chewed slowly, considering him. In the firelight, he looked less like marble and more like something painted beautiful but fundamentally unreal, as if he might dissolve if she looked away. He wore dark clothing again, severe and perfectly tailored, not a thread out of place. His hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp architecture of his face. You're staring, he observed. You're not human. I'm allowed to stare. His lips twitched. Fair enough. Shall I return the favor? Before she could answer, he did exactly that, studying her with the same clinical intensity he'd shown in the forest. Elara forced herself to remain still, to not fidget under that predatory gaze. She knew what he saw, a woman of 23, with dark hair she'd braided carelessly, gray eyes shadowed by too many sleepless nights, the kind of angular features people called handsome rather than beautiful. She wore one of the mysterious dresses from the wardrobe, deep green velvet that fit perfectly and must have cost more than her father had earned in a year. You look better, Lucian said finally. Less like a corpse. The color in your cheeks has returned. Your bedside manner needs work. I'm not at your bedside anymore. He leaned back, fingers steepled. You have questions. Ask them. I find ignorance tedious, and you'll serve me better if you understand the situation. Elara, set down the bread. Why did you save me? I told you. Your death would have poisoned. No, she cut him off, surprised by her own boldness. You could have let me die and dealt with the consequences. You said I was a problem. Why create a bigger one by binding yourself to a human? Silence. The fire crackled. Outside, an owl called, a lonely, haunting sound. You chose survival, Lucian said quietly. In your position, most would have begged for death, begged for mercy, for God, for their mothers. You simply stated your terms and accepted mine. That, he paused, searching for words. That was worth saving. So I'm what? A curiosity? An experiment? Perhaps. His amber eyes caught the firelight burning gold. Or perhaps I'm tired of watching humans waste their brief, brilliant lives on fear. You had the courage to run from one monster. I wanted to see if you'd have the courage to face another. The honesty startled her. Elara reached for the wine, took a careful sip. It was excellent, rich and smooth, warming her from within. Tell me about House Valmont. Why are they dangerous? All the houses are dangerous, Miss Ashford, but Valmont particularly so. He stood, moving to the window. They believe in absolute vampire supremacy. Humans are cattle, nothing more. They feed without consent, kill without consequence, and view our treaty with human governments as an amusing fiction. He glanced back at her. Their territory borders mine. We've been at odds for decades. Over what? Philosophy. They want to return to the old ways, hunting freely, claiming territories openly, ruling through fear. My house believes in discretion, in maintaining the careful balance that keeps both our species alive. His jaw tightened. 3 months ago, Valmont's heir challenged that balance. He slaughtered a human village on my land, left the bodies displayed like trophies, called it a message. Elara's appetite vanished. What did you do? What house law demanded? I killed him. Lucian turned fully to face her, and for the first time, she saw something dangerous flicker behind his controlled exterior. His father, Lord Valmont, has promised retribution. So yes, Elara Ashford, if they discover a living human under my protection, they'll use you as an excuse to start the war they've been craving. The words settled over her like ice water. Then why keep me here? Why not send me away? Because running didn't save you the first time. Because House Valmont has eyes everywhere, and a woman traveling alone would be easy prey. He moved toward her, each step deliberate. And because I made you a promise. Sanctuary until you're strong enough to leave. I keep my promises. He stopped before her, extended one pale hand. Now, our bargain. 3 drops. freely given. Do you consent? Elara looked at his hand-long fingers, elegant and cold and utterly inhuman. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to run, to wake from this nightmare. But Lord Pemberton was still out there, hunting for his escaped bride. And Lucian Corvus, for all his monstrous nature, had asked for her consent. She placed her hand in his. I consent, brave girl. He produced a small silver pin from his pocket. This will hurt, but only for a moment. He pressed the pin to her fingertip. A bead of blood welled up, dark and vital. Lucian raised her hand to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers, and took what she'd offered, 3 drops. No more. When he released her hand, his eyes had darkened to burnished copper, and his voice had gone rough. That's sufficient. Thank you. Elara cradled her hand, watching him step back, watching him fight for control. Does it always affect you like that? Your blood is unusually potent. I suspect you have distant vampire ancestry 5, perhaps 6 generations back. It makes you. He closed his eyes. Compelling. Is that a problem? Yes. He moved toward the door, movements slightly less controlled than before. Stay in this room tonight. Don't wander the manor. I need to adjust. Lucian, he paused at the threshold, not looking back. Thank you, Elara said softly, for keeping your promise. His shoulders tensed. Then, barely audible, don't thank me yet. Elara, the night is long, and monsters wear many faces. The door closed. Elara sat alone, touching her fingertip where his lips had been, and wondered which of them was in more danger. Chapter 4. Threads of Truth. Elara disobeyed his instruction within the hour, not out of defiance, though there was some of that, but out of necessity. The room, for all its painted stars and velvet luxury, had begun to feel like a gilded cage. And Elara had spent too many years trapped in her stepmother's house to voluntarily imprison herself again, even in beautiful surroundings. Besides, Lucian had said, don't wander. He hadn't locked the door. The corridor outside her room stretched in both directions, lit by candles and wall sconces that burned with steady, eternal flames. No wax stripped. No wicks shortened. Elara touched one experimentally and found it cold as ice, not fire at all, but some magical imitation. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. She moved left, because left had always felt lucky, her bare feet silent on carpet so thick it swallowed sound. Portraits lined the walls, men and women in clothing from different eras, all bearing the same unsettling beauty, the same predatory stillness in their painted eyes. The Corvus family, she presumed. Centuries of immortal faces staring down at her mortality. The corridor opened into a gallery. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating a space that stole her breath. Bookshelves climbing 2 stories high, their contents vast and varied. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, cold now, but clearly used. Comfortable chairs clustered near it, worn with age and affection. A desk sat beneath one window, covered in papers and correspondence. This was a lived-in space, a loved space. I specifically told you to stay in your room. Elara spun. Lucian stood in the doorway she'd just entered through, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He'd changed clothes again, or perhaps vampires simply willed their appearance into being. Now he wore a deep burgundy jacket over his white shirt, looking every inch the aristocrat he must have been in life. You didn't lock the door, she said, lifting her chin. I assumed you weren't serious. I'm always serious. Then you should invest in better locks. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or amusement. He moved into the gallery with that liquid grace, stopping near one of the tall windows. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Ashford. Can I be both? She turned back to the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. Latin, Greek, French, German, languages she couldn't identify. This collection is extraordinary. Some of these texts are ancient. I've had time to accumulate knowledge. He joined her at the shelves, pulling down a volume bound in cracked leather. This is a first edition Dante. Inferno, naturally. I met him once. Did you know? Bitter man, obsessed with a woman who barely knew he existed. He wrote his hell and called it poetry. Elara took the book carefully, reverently. You've lived through so much history. I've survived through it. There's a difference. He replaced the volume, selected another. History happens to humans. We simply endure it, watching your kind make the same mistakes century after century. War, greed, fear of the different. It becomes tedious. Is that why you isolate yourself here? Partially. He moved to the cold fireplace, one hand resting on the mantle. I served in human wars for the first century of my existence. Fought in crusades, believing I was doing God's work despite being damned. I killed for kings who turned to dust. Advised lords whose names no one remembers. His voice went distant. Then I watched the woman I loved grow old and die, and I realized the futility of it all. The confession hung in the air between them. Alara approached slowly, drawn by the rawness in his voice, the first truly human thing she'd heard from him. What was her name? Catherine. He stared into the empty fireplace as if seeing flames only he could perceive. She was kind, gentle, everything I'd forgotten how to be. She knew what I was and loved me anyway. I offered her immortality. She refused. Why? Because she wanted to die. His lips curved in a smile devoid of warmth. Not immediately, you understand. But eventually, she wanted grandchildren and age and the natural end of things. She said immortality was a prison, and she wouldn't trade her soul for it. He finally looked at Alara. She was 23 when she refused me. Your age. The parallel wasn't lost on her. And you let her go. I loved her. What else could I do? He pushed away from the mantle. She died at 78, surrounded by family I could never be part of. I attended her funeral from the shadows, and swore I'd never make the mistake of loving a human again. Alara absorbed this, understanding, clicking into place. Is that why you're helping me? Because I remind you of her? No, the word came sharp, definitive. Catherine was gentle. Your steel wrapped in skin. She accepted her fate. You ran from yours. He moved closer, studying her in the moonlight. If anything, you're her opposite, which makes you far more dangerous to me. I'm not dangerous to anyone. You're dangerous to yourself, which amounts to the same thing when you're under my protection. He reached out, and before she could react, brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cold, but the gesture was startlingly gentle. You ask questions when you should be silent. You explore when you should hide. You look at me like I'm a puzzle to solve rather than a predator to fear. His hand dropped away. It makes me want to keep you safe. And wanting anything beyond blood and silence is a complication I don't need. Alara's heart hammered. Then why did you tell me about Catherine? Because you asked. Because. He turned away, shoulders tense. Because for the first time in a century, I wanted to answer. And that terrifies me more than House Valmont ever could. The admission settled between them like a living thing. Outside, clouds crossed the moon, plunging the gallery into deeper shadow. Lucian was a pale figure in the darkness, beautiful and alien and achingly lonely. I won't ask you to care about me, Alara said quietly. But I won't pretend you're just a monster either. You've had 300 years of solitude, Lucian. Maybe it's time to remember what it feels like to have someone who sees you. He went very still. And what do you see? Someone who keeps his promises. Someone who reads Dante and cooks food he can't taste. Someone who loves so deeply he swore never to do it again. She took a step toward him. Someone lonely enough to save a dying woman in a forest, even when it would have been easier to let her die. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Another step. You could have wiped my memory of you. Sent me away with false memories and no debt. But you didn't. You brought me here. You're protecting me. Why? Because he stopped, jaw clenched. Because you chose to survive. And that matters. Why does it matter? Because most of what I see in 300 years is humans giving up. The words tore from him, raw and unexpected. Surrendering to fear, to despair, to the comfortable numbness of letting others control their lives. But you bleeding, dying, helpless, you still fought, still chose. His eyes burned gold. How could I not save that? The vulnerability in his voice struck her like a physical blow. Alara closed the distance between them, close enough to see the inhuman stillness of his chest, the way he held himself rigidly apart. Then let me stay, she said. Not as a debt or an obligation, but because maybe we both need to remember what it's like to not be alone. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, you should go back to your room. I should, she agreed. But she didn't move, neither did he. The gallery held its breath around them, full of moonlight and old books, and the complicated space between monster and woman, immortal and mortal, loneliness and the terrifying possibility of connection. Finally, Lucian stepped back. Tomorrow night, I'll show you the rest of Thornhaven. You should know where the exits are, in case Valmont comes. And tonight, I need to hunt. And you need to sleep. He moved toward the door. Stay out of the West Wing. Those rooms aren't safe for humans. Lucian, he paused, not looking back. Thank you for telling me about Catherine. His shoulders tensed. Don't make me regret it, Alara. Then he was gone, moving with that impossible speed, leaving her alone with the books and the moonlight, and the dangerous realization that she was beginning to trust him. Chapter 5. The Storm Breaks. The attack came 3 nights later. During a thunderstorm that shook Thornhaven's ancient stones, Alara had fallen into a strange routine in those 72 hours, sleeping while Lucian rested in whatever daylight sanctuary he kept hidden, waking at dusk to find him already moving through the manor's corridors. He'd kept his promise, showing her the exits for the safe rooms too, the places where sunlight never reached even at noon. Too many to count. They'd shared quiet evenings in the gallery, him reading while she sketched the manor's architecture in a journal he'd provided. He'd taught her the basics of vampire etiquette: never ask their age, never touch without permission, never invite them into your thoughts. That last one had confused her until he'd explained. Old vampires could read surface emotions, taste fear and desire in the air. Privacy, he'd said, was the rarest gift a human could offer. She'd also given him blood twice more, 3 drops each time, the pinprick now familiar, his restraint absolute. But she'd noticed how his eyes darkened when he fed, how his hands trembled slightly afterward, how he always left immediately to compose himself in solitude. Your blood affects me, he'd admitted on the second night. It's unusually rich, potent. It makes me want. He'd stopped, jaw clenched. It makes me want more than I should. She hadn't known what to say to that. Still didn't. Now she sat in the gallery, watching lightning illuminate the forest beyond the windows, and tried to pretend the thunder didn't make her jump. Lucian had gone hunting an hour ago. He needed to feed properly, not just survive on her meager offerings, and she'd promised to stay inside, away from windows, safe. The first sign of trouble was the silence. The storm didn't stop. The rain continued its assault on the windows. The thunder still rolled across the sky, but beneath it, around it, the night went unnaturally quiet. No wind through the trees, no owl calls, no small sounds of a living forest, just silence, and the terrible sense of something waiting. Alara stood, moving away from the windows. Her heart hammered against her ribs loud enough, she remembered with creeping dread, for vampires to hear from a distance. The front door exploded inward with a crack of splintering wood. She ran. No thought, pure instinct, diving behind one of the gallery's massive bookcases as footsteps echoed through Thornhaven's entrance hall. Multiple sets, moving fast, confident, spreading through the manor like poison through veins. Find the human. The voice was cultured, male, edged with cruel amusement. Corvus's pet. Lord Valmont wants her alive, but damaged is acceptable. Valmont. The name sent ice through her blood. Alara pressed herself against the bookcase, mind racing. 4 exits, Lucian had said. The main door compromised. The kitchen entrance too far. The servants' passage, she'd never find it in the dark. That left the gallery's terrace doors, currently locked, leading to a 2-story drop into the garden. Better than being captured. She moved silently, grateful for bare feet on thick carpet, reaching the terrace doors just as voices echoed in the corridor outside. Her fingers found the lock, twisted, going somewhere. Little human? The vampire appeared in the doorway with inhuman speed. Male, young-looking, with the kind of predatory beauty that marked his kind. He wore expensive clothing stained with rain, and his eyes burned crimson in the lightning's flash. Fresh from feeding then. Dangerous. Lord Valmont sends his regards, he said, moving into the gallery. And his invitation. You're to come with us. Willingly or otherwise. Alara's hand closed on a heavy candlestick from a nearby table. Silver, solid, probably priceless. She lifted it like a club. I decline. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Adorable. Corvus has trained you to have courage. How delightful. I'll enjoy breaking it. He lunged. Alara swung the candlestick with every ounce of strength she possessed, connecting with his temple. The impact jarred her arms, but the vampire merely staggered, more surprised than hurt. You little. The terrace doors exploded inward. Not from her unlocking them, but from the force of another vampire crashing through them in a spray of glass and splintered wood. Lucian. He moved like violence made flesh. A blur of controlled fury that placed himself between Alara and the Valmont vampire in less than a heartbeat. Rain streamed through the shattered doors, drenching them all. and lightning illuminated the absolute rage on Lucian's face. "You dare," he said softly. And somehow his quiet voice was more terrifying than any shout. "You dare enter my home, threaten what is mine, Lord Valmont's orders." The younger vampire spat, backing away. "The human is leverage. Your protection of her proves nothing except that I honor my debts." Lucian's hand shot out, impossibly fast, catching the vampire by the throat. "Tell your master this. House Corvus does not yield to threats. And anyone who crosses my threshold uninvited will leave in pieces." He threw the vampire through the already shattered terrace doors. The body sailed through rain and lightning, disappearing into the storm-dark garden with a distant crash. More footsteps. 3 other vampires appeared in the gallery doorway, these older, more dangerous. Lucian turned to face them, his body a coiled spring, and Alara realized with shock that he was outmatched. 3 against 1, and he'd just expelled significant energy fighting. "Alara," he said, not looking at her. "The West Wing. The room with the iron door. Go, now." "I'm not leaving you now." She ran. Hated herself for it, but ran through corridors she'd memorized, past portraits whose painted eyes seemed to track her flight, into the West Wing he'd forbidden her to enter. Behind her, sounds of violence erupted, crashes, snarls, the terrible crack of superhuman bodies colliding. The iron door stood at the corridor's end, exactly as he'd described. Alara wrenched it open, stumbled inside and stopped. The room was small, windowless, lined with silver. And in its center, suspended by chains from the ceiling, hung what looked like medieval restraints. A prison cell. Not for keeping others out, but for keeping something in. For keeping Lucian in, when he needed to be contained. The realization struck her like a blow. He'd sent her to his own prison, the place where he locked himself away when control slipped. When the monster threatened to overwhelm the man, he'd sent her to the safest room in Thornhaven, the one even he couldn't breach without permission. The sounds of fighting grew closer. A body hit a wall hard enough to crack stone. Lucian's voice strained. "Stay inside. Lock the door. Don't come out until dawn." "Lucian, I'm sorry," he called, and his voice carried centuries of regret. "I'm sorry I couldn't keep you safe." A roar. Multiple voices raised in triumph. The sickening sound of flesh tearing. Then silence. Alara stood in the silver-lined room, hands pressed to the iron door, listening to nothing. The storm raged outside. Rain hammered the manor, but inside, only silence answered her desperate whisper. "Lucian?" No response. She was alone in the monster's prison, listening to silence, and somewhere beyond the iron door, the vampires of House Valmont were hunting through Thornhaven's corridors, looking for her. Alara's fingers found the door's internal lock, a heavy bolt she could slide into place, sealing herself inside. Safety, survival, everything she'd fought for when she'd fled Lord Pemberton's estate. But Lucian was out there, wounded, possibly dying. If vampires could die, he'd protected her, taught her, showed her his loneliness and trusted her with his grief. She'd told him she saw someone who kept his promises. Time to prove she kept hers. Alara opened the door and stepped back into the darkness. Chapter 6. Blood and Silver. The corridor was devastated. Alara moved through the destruction with her heart in her throat, portraits torn from walls, furniture shattered, carpet scorched by something she didn't want to identify. The storm's fury had invaded through broken windows, rain pooling on ancient floors, lightning casting everything in stark, violent relief. She found Lucian in the entrance hall. He was on his knees, surrounded by 3 Valmont vampires who circled him like wolves. Blood darker than human blood, almost black, stained his white shirt. His jacket was torn, revealing lacerations across his chest that should have been fatal. One arm hung at an unnatural angle, but his eyes, when they found hers, burned with absolute fury. "I told you to stay inside," he rasped. "You tell me a lot of things." Alara's voice shook, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I'm not good at following orders." The Valmont vampires turned as one. The tallest, a woman with platinum hair and ancient eyes, smiled slowly. "How touching. The pet returns to die with her master. Lord Valmont will be pleased we've recovered you." "I'm not anyone's pet." Alara's mind raced, cataloging everything Lucian had taught her. Vampire weaknesses, silver, sunlight, fire, religious symbols. If the vampire believed, decapitation. She had none of these things. What she had was a candlestick still clutched in her white-knuckled grip and desperation, and apparently, vampire blood in her veins from 5 generations back. "Let him go," she said. Your quarrel is with House Corvus, not with me. I'm just a human. He saved. I mean nothing to him. Liar. The platinum-haired vampire moved closer, inhaling deeply. I can smell his blood in you. Smell how you fed him. And the way he looks at you. She laughed. Oh, little human. You mean everything. Which is precisely why Lord Valmont wants you. Lucian surged to his feet with a snarl that rattled the windows. Touch her, and I'll tear your throat out, Celeste. Will you? Celeste tilted her head. You're wounded, outnumbered, and weakened from protecting this fragile thing. Face reality, Lucian. You've already lost. She was right. Ilara could see it in the way Lucian swayed, in the blood still seeping from wounds that should have healed. He'd expended too much energy fighting, protecting, keeping the Valmont vampires away from the Iron Room, away from her daughter. An idea formed reckless, probably suicidal, but better than surrender. You want me alive, Ilara said, as leverage against House Corvus. But what happens if I'm not alive? What happens if she raised the candlestick to her own throat, pressing the edge against her jugular. If I die, you lose your leverage. And Lucian loses his debt to me. Everyone loses. The room went silent except for the storm's rage. Ilara, Lucian said, his voice dangerously soft. Don't. Why not? She met his eyes, hoping he could read her intent. You said I chose survival in that forest. Maybe I'm choosing something else now. Maybe I'm choosing agency. If I'm going to die anyway, better by my own hand than as someone's prisoner. Celeste's expression hardened. You're bluffing. Am I? Ilara pressed harder, felt the candlestick's edge bite into her skin. A trickle of blood, warm, vital, ran down her neck. I ran from one captor. You think I'll submit to another? The scent of her blood filled the hall. All three Valmont vampires tensed, their eyes darkening with hunger. Even Lucian went rigid, his control visibly fracturing. Potent blood, one of the male vampires whispered. Ancient bloodline. Can you smell it? Stand down, Celeste commanded, but uncertainty flickered across her perfect features. Lord Valmont wants her intact. Then tell him to ask nicely. Ilara's voice stayed steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. I'm not property. I'm not a pawn. And I won't be used to start your war. Ilara, Lucian's voice cracked. Please. She ignored him, focused on Celeste. You have 3 seconds to leave Thornhaven. If you're still here when I count to 0, I finish this. And you return to Lord Valmont empty-handed, having failed your mission and lost 3 vampires in the process. She met Celeste's ancient eyes. 3, 2, enough. Celeste's hand shot up, stopping her companions from advancing. This isn't over, Corvus. Lord Valmont will have his answer about the human's presence here. About why you've broken centuries of isolation for a mortal girl. Tell him, Lucian said, each word edged with violence, that House Corvus's affairs are none of his concern. And the next vampire who crosses my threshold dies. Celeste's lips curved. Such passion. Catherine would be disappointed to see you making the same mistake twice. She turned to her companions. We're leaving. But this conversation will continue. They moved toward the shattered front door with that inhuman speed. At the threshold, Celeste paused. Enjoy your pet while she lasts, Lucian. Mortality is so inconveniently brief. Then they were gone, swallowed by storm and darkness. The moment they vanished, Ilara's legs gave out. She collapsed, the candlestick clattering from nerveless fingers, her whole body shaking with delayed shock. Blood still trickled from the shallow cut on her throat, not deep enough to be dangerous, but enough to have sold the bluff. Lucian was beside her in an instant, moving despite his wounds. You foolish, brave, impossible woman. His hands framed her face, tilting her head to examine the cut. You could have died, so could you. Her voice came out small, all the bravado drained away. You are dying. I'm already dead, but his hands trembled against her skin. You're not. You're alive, and warm, and you just threatened suicide to save me. Do you have any idea how? He stopped, jaw clenched. Why? Because you asked me what I saw in you. She met his eyes, gold bleeding into desperate amber. I see someone worth saving, even if he doesn't see it himself. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then, with infinite gentleness, he bent and lifted her into his arms. She should have protested she could walk. She wasn't that fragile, but exhaustion and shock made her boneless, and his cold body felt strangely safe. The cut needs cleaning, he said quietly. And you need rest. The adrenaline will fade, and then you'll crash. What about your wounds? I'll heal. Vampire bodies are resilient. He carried her toward the stairs. But I need blood to accelerate the process. Substantial blood, not 3 drops. Alara understood. You need to hunt. I do. Which means leaving you alone in a manner they've already breached once. His arms tightened fractionally. I won't do that. Not tonight. Then take mine. The words emerged before she could think them through. More than 3 drops. Whatever you need to heal. He stopped walking. Alara, that's not part of our bargain. I'm changing the bargain. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You protected me. Let me protect you. You don't know what you're offering. Taking blood directly from the vein. His voice roughened. It's intimate, intense, for both parties. And with blood as potent as yours, I might not be able to stop at what I need. I might take too much. Do you want to? What? Take too much. Kill me. She held his gaze. Because if you don't, then I trust you to stop. You've had 300 years of control, Lucian. I'm betting you can manage it for a few more minutes. Thunder rolled overhead. Rain drummed against broken windows. Lucian stood frozen at the base of the stairs, holding her like something precious and breakable, warring with himself. Finally, I'll take you to the gallery. The settee. And if at any point you want me to stop, I'll tell you. She touched his face, cold marble that somehow felt alive beneath her fingers. I promise. He carried her to the gallery in silence, settling her on the velvet settee near the cold fireplace. The storm raged beyond the windows, but here, surrounded by books and moonlight and the strange safety of Thornhaven's walls, the world felt distant. Lucian knelt beside her, his damaged body still healing to slowly. Last chance to refuse. Alara tilted her head, exposing her throat. I'm not refusing. His eyes darkened to burnished gold. Then God forgive me. He bent to her neck, and his lips found her pulse. Chapter 7. The binding first sensation was cold. Lucian's lips against her throat, gentle despite the predator beneath his skin. Then pressure, the careful scrape of fangs that hadn't been visible a moment before. Alara's breath caught, steady. He murmured against her skin. This will hurt, but only for a moment. He bit down. Pain lanced through her sharp, bright, stealing her breath. But almost immediately, something else flooded in behind it, warmth that spread from the bite point like wine through water, turning pain into something she had no name for. Her fingers tightened on his shoulder, not pushing away, but anchoring herself. Lucian made a sound low in his throat, not quite a growl, more like relief after decades of thirst. His hand cupped the back of her head, supporting her, keeping her steady as he drank. She could feel it, the pull of her blood leaving her body, flowing into him. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying. But beneath the fear lay something stranger, connection. As if each swallow tied them together, weaving invisible threads between mortal and immortal, living and dead, hunter and prey, or perhaps not prey at all. Alara's vision swam, the room, tilting gently. Her heartbeat seemed to echo through both their bodies, her racing pulse matched by the gradual return of strength in his frame. She felt his wounds closing, felt the broken bones in his arm realigning, felt vitality returning to his cold flesh. He was healing because of her, because she'd chosen to give what he needed. The intimacy of it staggered her. Just when darkness began creeping into the edges of her vision, Lucian pulled away. The loss of contact felt physical, a severing that left her gasping. He pressed his hand over the bite, and she felt warmth there, not cold. Magic, she realized distantly, sealing the wound, stopping the bleeding. Alara. His voice was rough, barely controlled. Look at me. She forced her eyes open. Lucian knelt before her, transformed. His wounds were gone. His arm hung naturally. Actual color touched his pale cheeks, and his eyes burned like molten gold, more alive than she'd ever seen them. He looked almost human, almost mortal, beautiful and terrible and utterly focused on her. Are you all right? His hand remained on her throat, feeling her pulse. Talk to me. She searched for words. Lightheaded. But fine. That was intense, he finished. I warned you. You didn't warn me it would feel like that. Her voice came out breathy. Like we were connected. Something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps fear. That's the blood bond forming. When a vampire feeds directly from someone repeatedly, especially someone with potent blood, it creates TIs, emotional, sometimes mental. I should have been more careful. Should have, or chose not to be. His jaw tightened. Does it matter? Yes. Alara sat up slowly, fighting dizziness. Because if you knew this would happen and did it anyway, that means you wanted it to happen. And I need to know if this bond is real or just chemistry. Lucian stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain still lashed the glass, but the storm was weakening. Dawn would come eventually, forcing him to whatever sanctuary he kept hidden. The bond magnifies what's already there. If there's nothing between two people, feeding creates nothing but physical sensation. But if there's already connection, compatibility, he stopped, fists clenched. It amplifies it, makes it impossible to ignore, and is there. Her heart hammered. Connection between us? You know there is. He didn't turn around. You knew at the moment you didn't scream when you saw what I was. When you chose my bargain over death. When you came back tonight instead of staying in the iron room. Then why does it scare you? Because it's a mistake. He spun to face her, and for the first time, she saw his legendary control completely shattered. Because I've made this mistake before, Alara. I fell in love with a mortal woman, and watched her grow old and die while I remained unchanged. I held her hand as she breathed her last breath, and I swore I would never feel that pain again. I'm not Catherine. I know. You're worse. He moved toward her with predatory intensity. Catherine was gentle, safe. She fit into my world quietly, asked for nothing, made no demands. But you, he stopped just beyond reach. You're fire and steel, and questions I don't want to answer. You threaten your own life to save mine. You walk into danger when you should run. You make me want things I buried with her a century ago. Alara stood on, shaking legs, closing the distance he'd maintained. What things? Companionship? The word emerged like a confession. Conversation that matters. Someone who sees past the monster to the man I used to be. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched her face. Someone who makes 300 years of loneliness feel like a mistake instead of a choice. Her breath caught. Lucian, but it doesn't matter what I want. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Because you're mortal. You'll have 40, maybe 50 years if you're lucky. And I'll have eternity. I can't offer you anything that doesn't end in me watching you die. What if I don't want eternity? Alara covered his hand with hers, keeping it against her face. What if I just want now? Tonight, tomorrow, however many nights we have before Valmont returns or my time runs out. That's not enough. It's more than I had 3 days ago. She held his burning gaze. 3 days ago I was running toward death, preferring it to the life I'd been given. You gave me a choice, Lucian. You gave me agency. Don't take it away now by deciding what I can handle. He stared at her, conflict raging in his ancient eyes. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Stop protecting me from information and let me make my own decisions. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the supernatural cold radiating from his body, tempered now by her blood warming him from within. I'm not a child. I'm not fragile. And I'm not Catherine. No, he agreed quietly. You're not. You're something far more dangerous. To you or to myself? Both. His other hand rose to frame her face, holding her like something infinitely precious. The blood bond will grow stronger each time I feed from you. Eventually, you'll feel what I feel, know what I'm thinking, and I'll know your every emotion, every fear, every desire. There will be no privacy between us, no secrets. Is that what you're afraid of? That I'll see the truth of what you are? I'm afraid, he said, that you'll see the truth of what you are to me, and it will terrify you into running. Thunder rumbled, distant now. The storm was dying, leaving only rain and the approaching dawn. Alara could feel exhaustion pulling at her, blood loss, adrenaline crash, the weight of impossible choices pressing down, but beneath it all, she felt the bond Lucian described. A thread of warmth connecting them, letting her sense his conflict, his desire, his bone-deep terror of losing someone he was beginning to care for. I'm not running, she whispered. Not from Valmont, not from whatever this is between us. I'm staying until you make me leave. And if I never make you leave, then I guess we'll find out what happens when an immortal lets himself care about someone mortal. She managed a tired smile. Sounds like a story worth living. Lucian made a sound between a laugh and a groan. You're going to destroy me, maybe. She swayed slightly, dizziness returning. But not tonight. Tonight I need to sleep before I fall over. He caught her instantly, lifting her again with ease. I'm taking you to bed. Your bed. He clarified at her raised eyebrow. You need rest, real rest. And I need to repair the manor's defenses before dawn. Forces me to sleep. Will Valmont come back? Not immediately. Celeste will report to him, and he'll plan his next move carefully. We have time. He carried her toward the stairs. But not much. House Valmont doesn't forgive trespass, and I've made my position clear. This ends in blood, Lara. Either his or mine. Or we find a third option. There isn't one. There's always a third option. She rested her head against his shoulder, too tired to maintain pride. You've had 300 years of the same solutions. Maybe you need Immortal perspective. He was quiet until they reached her room. The painted stars watched as he settled her on the bed, pulling blankets over her with surprising tenderness. Sleep, he commanded softly. We'll face tomorrow's disasters. Tomorrow? Lucian? She caught his hand before he could leave. Thank you. For trusting me with your blood. For letting me help. His fingers tightened on hers. Thank you for not running when you saw what I truly am. A man who keeps his promises, she murmured, eyes already closing. A man who loved deeply enough to still grieve. A man worth saving. She felt his lips brush her forehead, cold and gentle. Sleep, brave girl. I'll keep you safe. And surrounded by painted stars and the lingering warmth of their blood bond, Lara slept. Chapter 8. Lessons in Immortality. Lara woke to candlelight and the scent of old books, for a disoriented moment. She thought she was back in her father's study before the creditors came. That safe, warm place where the world made sense and consisted only of pages and possibility. Then memory returned. The storm, the attack, Lucian's fangs in her throat, the blood bond forming between mortal and immortal. She sat up, carefully, testing her body. Weak, but functional. The bite mark on her neck was completely healed, not even a scar remained, just smooth skin that tingled when she touched it. More vampire magic, presumably. She wondered what other impossible things Lucian could do that he hadn't mentioned yet. A note lay on the bedside table, written in elegant script. You slept 16 hours. I've taken the liberty of having food prepared to eat before you attempt the stairs. The blood loss was significant. Come to the gallery when you're ready. We need to talk about what happens next. 16 hours. She'd slept through an entire night and most of the following day. Now dusk was falling again, painting her room in shades of amber and shadow. Lucian would be waking soon, if he hadn't already. The promised food waited on a tray by the fireplace. Bread, cheese, cold meat, fruit, and a glass of deep red wine. Lara ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. The blood bond hummed at the edge of her awareness, not intrusive, but present. Like knowing someone stood in the next room. Their presence a tangible warmth. She could almost feel Lucian waking. The sensation was subtle, but undeniable, a shift in the manor's atmosphere. As if Thornhaven itself responded to its master's consciousness. By the time she'd dressed in another of the mysterious wardrobe's offerings, a deep blue gown that fit perfectly and must have cost a fortune. Full night had fallen. Lara made her way to the gallery, following instinct as much as memory. Lucian stood by the repaired terrace doors. He must have worked through the previous night fixing the damage, staring out at the forest. He'd changed into charcoal gray, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, and he looked younger. Wasn't quite right. More present, perhaps. As if her blood had returned some vital spark to his ageless frame. You feel it, he said, without turning. The bond. You knew I was awake. Yes. She joined him at the window. Is it always this strong? It will grow stronger. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were their normal amber, controlled, careful, but with warmth beneath. Each feeding intensifies it. Eventually, strong emotions will bleed through automatically. Fear, joy, pain. You'll feel what I feel. I'll know what you're experiencing. That sounds complicated. It is. Especially when one party is immortal and the other. He stopped, jaw tightening. It creates dependencies. Attachments that become dangerous when mortality is involved. Lara studied his profile. You're trying to warn me away again. I'm trying to give you information to make an informed choice. He moved to the desk, pulling out a leather-bound volume. Which is why we're going to spend tonight teaching you about vampire society. About house laws, blood oaths, the politics that govern my kind. If you're going to survive in my world, you need to understand it. She raised an eyebrow. You're giving me lessons? I'm giving you weapons. Knowledge is the only real power humans have against vampires. He set the book on the table between the chairs. Sit, learn, and don't interrupt unless you have questions that matter, for the next several hours. Lucian taught her the hidden architecture of vampire society. She learned about the 5 great houses: Corvus, Valmont, Sanguine, Nocturne, and Ashencroft, each controlling vast territories, each with different philosophies about human interaction. Corvus believed in discretion and consent. Valmont believed in dominance. Sanguine pursued pleasure above all. Nocturne studied magic and old ways. Ashencroft had isolated themselves completely. Speaking to no other house for over a century, she learned about blood oaths binding promises sworn in blood that couldn't be broken without destroying the vampire who swore them. Lucian had sworn oaths to protect his territory, to honor house law, to never create new vampires without consent of the council. Can oaths be transferred? She asked. If you swore to protect your territory, and someone else became lord of this land, the oath would kill me. His expression remained neutral. Blood oaths bind until death or until the oath's conditions are fulfilled. There's no transfer, no escape clause. You swear it, you keep it, or you die. That seems excessive. It keeps us honest. When you live forever, consequences need to be absolute. She learned about feeding rights, that vampires could only feed from willing humans. That taking blood without consent was grounds for execution. That killing a human through feeding was the highest crime in vampire law. Though Valmont interprets consent loosely, Lucian added darkly. Coercion, manipulation, threatening someone's family, they consider all of that valid persuasion rather than violation. And the other houses allow this. We're not a democracy, Elara. Each house rules its own territory. Unless Valmont openly breaks treaty with human governments, the other houses won't interfere. It would mean war. Is that what's happening now? War? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. It's what Valmont wants. They've been pushing boundaries for years, hunting too openly, feeding too aggressively, challenging other houses' sovereignty. Last night's attack crossed a line. They entered my home without invitation, threatened someone under my protection. That's grounds for formal challenge. What does that mean? It means Lord Valmont and I meet before the council, state our grievances, and either reach accord or he stopped, or what? Or settle it through blood trial. Single combat to the death. Winner takes the loser's territory and holdings. His eyes met hers. It's how houses have resolved disputes for millennia. Alara's blood ran cold. He wants your territory. He wants to eliminate the one house that opposes his vision of vampire supremacy. With Corvus gone, he could pressure Sanguine and Nocturne into compliance. Ashencroft wouldn't interfere. He'd effectively control England. Lucian stood, pacing. And he's powerful. Older than me by centuries. Stronger, faster, with magic I've barely studied. In a fair fight, I'd lose. Then we don't fight fair. He turned sharply. What? You said knowledge is power. So we learn everything we can about him. His weaknesses, his patterns, his blood oaths. There has to be something, some leverage we can use. She stood, moving to the desk. You've been alive 300 years. You said you advised lords, fought in wars. Use that experience. Think strategically. Not just martially. Lucian stared at her. You want to help me prepare for combat against a vampire lord? I want to help you survive. There's a difference. She met his gaze steadily. You said I was steel wrapped in skin. Let me prove it. Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something warmer, more dangerous. This is madness. Good thing I'm used to madness. She smiled, despite the gravity of the situation. What do we know about Lord Valmont that we can exploit? Elara, don't. She cut him off. Don't protect me from this. Don't try to handle it alone. You've been alone for a century, Lucian. Maybe it's time to accept help. He studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he returned to the desk and pulled out another book, this one bound in what looked uncomfortably like human skin. This is a genealogy of House Valmont. Their bloodlines, their oaths, their historical alliances. He opened it carefully. If there's a weakness, it's documented here. But this research will take days, possibly weeks. And we might not have that much time. Then we start now. Elara pulled her chair closer to his. Show me what you know. As they bent over the ancient tome together, the blood bond hummed between them, not intrusive, but present. A reminder that they were no longer separate beings, but something more complicated, bound by blood and choice and the desperate need to survive what was coming. Outside, the forest waited in silence. Somewhere beyond Thornhaven's walls, House Valmont was planning their next move, and dawn seemed very far away. But for now, in candlelight, and surrounded by books, Mortal and immortal worked together, learning, planning, preparing for the war that was no longer just coming. It had already begun. Lucian's hand found hers across the ancient pages, cold fingers threading through warm. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying, for fighting, for seeing something worth saving in a monster." Alara squeezed his hand. "Thank you for letting me." And in the painted starlight of the gallery, they began their research. Two against the darkness, mortality and immortality intertwined, facing impossible odds, together. Chapter 9. The council summons. The messenger arrived on the third night of their research. Alara had fallen into a strange rhythm, sleeping during daylight hours when Lucian rested, waking at dusk to continue their work. They'd discovered fragments. Lord Valmont had sworn a blood oath to his house's founder to preserve the ancient ways, which explained his resistance to modern vampire-human accords. His eldest son, the one Lucian had killed, had been his designated heir, meaning the succession was now contested among 3 remaining children. Weakness, possibly, if they could exploit the internal power struggle, but not enough. Not nearly enough to guarantee victory in blood trial. She was transcribing notes from a particularly dense volume on vampire combat protocols when the gallery's temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the windows in spiraling patterns. The candles flickered despite no wind. Lucian stood instantly, moving between her and the doorway. "Stay behind me." "What's happening?" "Magic. Old magic." Someone sent a formal summons. The air in the gallery's center began to shimmer. Reality bent, twisted, and suddenly a figure stood where empty space had been, not physically present, but projected. A woman in flowing robes that seemed woven from midnight itself, her face ageless and severe, her eyes wholly black. "Lucian Corvus, third of your house." Her voice echoed as if spoken in a cathedral. "The Council of 5 has convened. You are summoned to answer Lord Valmont's accusation of harboring a human in violation of territorial law, and his formal challenge for blood trial. You will present yourself at the Nocturne Holdings at midnight, 3 nights hence. Failure to appear will result in forfeiture of your lands and title." "I'll be there," Lucian said flatly. The woman's black eyes shifted to Alara. "The human may attend as witness if she consents. Be warned, the council chamber offers no sanctuary. Once you enter, you submit to our judgment." Before Alara could respond, the projection dissolved. The temperature returned to normal. The frost vanished as if it had never existed. Silence. "That was Lady Nocturne," Lucian said quietly, "head of her house and eldest of the council. If she's personally delivering summons, this is more serious than I thought." Alara stood on shaking legs. "What does it mean? Harboring a human in violation of territorial law? It means Valmont is arguing that your presence here, a human with vampire ancestry, fed upon and blood bonded, constitutes a legal transformation without council approval." He turned to face her, expression grim. "He's claiming I'm trying to create a new vampire without permission, which carries a death sentence. But you're not. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It matters what he can make the council believe." Lucian moved to the window, fists clenched. "And if they rule against me before the blood trial, I'll be executed before I can fight. He wins without risking combat." Alara's mind raced. "Then we prove you're not transforming me. I testify. Show them I'm still human, still mortal. It's not that simple. The blood bond itself is evidence. The feeding, the fact that you're healing faster than normal humans, yes, I've noticed," he added at her surprised look. "That cut on your throat should have taken a week to heal completely. It vanished in hours. My blood is changing you, even if slowly. Is that bad?" "It's complicated." He faced her fully. "In small doses over time, vampire blood can extend human life, slow aging, enhance natural healing. But it also makes you more susceptible to full transformation. If I were to drain you to the point of death and offer you my blood, you'd turn. Easily. Much more easily than a normal human." The implications settled over her like a shroud. "So Valmont isn't entirely wrong." "No, he's not." Lucian's voice went soft, regretful. "I should have considered this. Should have realized feeding from you would paint a target on both our backs. But your blood was so potent, and I was so focused on healing, on surviving Valmont's attack, that I didn't think beyond the immediate moment. We both made that choice," Alara said firmly. "Don't take my agency away by claiming sole responsibility. I offered my blood. I knew the risks, or at least, I knew there were risks. We deal with the consequences together." He studied her for a long moment. "The council will ask you questions. Invasive questions about our relationship, about whether I've coerced you, about whether you desire transformation. They'll try to determine if you're here willingly or if I've used vampire influence to manipulate you. What's vampire influence? A form of mental compulsion. Weak vampires can make suggestions humans find hard to resist. Strong vampires can override, will entirely make humans see things that aren't there, believe lies as truth, act against their own interests. His expression darkened. It's forbidden by house law except in extreme circumstances, but difficult to prove unless the vampire admits it. Alara felt cold. Have you ever used it on me? No, the answer came swift, absolute. Never. I don't use compulsion except to hide from humans who stumble onto my territory accidentally, a gentle nudge to forget they saw me and choose a different path, but never on you. Everything you've felt, every choice you've made, has been yours alone. She believed him. The bond between them would have revealed deception, she was sure of that much. Then I'll tell the council exactly that I'm here by choice, that you've asked for my consent at every turn, that whatever is developing between us is genuine, not manufactured. They may not believe you, then we make them believe. She moved closer, taking his cold hands in her warm ones. You've spent 3 days teaching me vampire politics. Now teach me how to navigate vampire court. What do I wear? How do I address them? What questions should I expect? Lucian stared down at their joined hands. You're really willing to face the Council of Five? The most powerful vampires in England, any one of whom could kill you with a thought. I faced down Valmont's vampires with a candlestick. I think I can handle some questions. She managed a smile despite her terror. Besides, you'll be there. You won't let them hurt me. I can't. His voice cracked slightly. House law forbids violence against witnesses in council chambers. But there are other ways to hurt Alara. Mental manipulation, fear induction. They'll dig into your memories, your traumas, looking for evidence of compulsion. They'll make you relive your worst moments to see if I planted false memories. She swallowed hard. My worst moments have nothing to do with you. They'll see that. Will they? Or will they see a woman fleeing one predator straight into the arms of another? Will they believe you chose me, or that I simply offered a prettier cage than Lord Pemberton? His hands tightened on hers. I can't protect you from their judgment, Alara. In that chamber, I'm just another vampire under scrutiny. Then it's good I don't need protection. I need preparation. She pulled him toward the desk. We have 3 nights. Teach me everything I need to know. How to address each council member. What questions they'll ask. How to prove my will is my own. Alara, 3 nights, she repeated. Stop arguing and start teaching. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then something shifted in his expression, resignation giving way to determination. Very well. But you follow my instructions exactly. The council doesn't tolerate disrespect, and they're far less patient than I am. Understood. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, began writing names in that elegant script. The Council of Five, Lady Nocturne, who you've seen. She's the eldest, and most concerned with magical law. Lord Ashencroft rarely speaks, but controls the deciding vote when the council deadlocks. Lady Sanguine is, he paused, unpredictable. She values passion and authenticity above protocol. Then there's Lord Valmont himself, yes, he sits on the council that will judge his own challenge. And finally, I represent House Corvus. Wait, you're on the council? I am, though I'll recuse myself from voting on my own case. His smile was grim. Which leaves 4 votes to determine my fate. We need at least 2 in our favor to avoid execution before the blood trial. Alara studied the names. Then we need to understand what each of them values. What arguments will sway them? She met his eyes. And we need to show them that what's between us, whatever it is real. Not compulsion. Not manipulation. Real. And if they ask what it is, this thing between us? His voice went soft. What do we tell them? The question hung in the air. Alara felt the blood bond pulse between them, warmth and connection, and something deeper she didn't have words for yet. The truth, she said finally. That we're 2 people trying to survive in a world that wants us dead or separated. That we've chosen to face it together. That whatever we become, it's our choice to make. Lucian's thumb brushed across her knuckles. They'll say it's not real. That immortals can't truly love mortals, that the difference is too vast. Then they've never felt this. She pressed her hand over his heart, where no beat answered. Have they? His eyes darkened to amber fire. No, most haven't. Most of us learned to stop feeling centuries ago. It's safer that way. Safer, Alara echoed. But lonelier. Yes, the word emerged like a confession. Infinitely lonelier. They stood together in the candlelight, mortal and immortal, bound by blood and choice, and the impossible thing growing between them. Outside, 3 nights separated them from judgment, from the council that would determine their fate. But for now, they had this moment, this choice, this fragile, dangerous connection. Teach me, Alara whispered. Teach me how to fight for us. Chapter 10. The Shoisith Council chamber existed outside normal geography. Alara had expected a throne room, perhaps a Gothic hall dripping with ancient grandeur. Instead, Lucian led her through a doorway in Thornhaven's deepest cellar, a doorway that opened onto impossible space. They stepped through and emerged into a circular chamber carved from obsidian, lit by floating orbs of cold fire. No windows, no other exits, just smooth black walls that seemed to absorb sound. And 5 thrones arranged in a perfect pentagon. 4 were occupied. Lady Nocturne sat to the north, her midnight robes flowing like liquid shadow, those holy black eyes, tracking their entrance with predatory focus. Lord Ashencroft occupied the east throne, ancient beyond measure, his face skeletal, his body so still he might have been carved from bone. To the south, Lady Sanguine reclined with studied casualness, crimson hair spilling over pale shoulders, her smile sharp and curious. And west sat Lord Valmont himself. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and cold perfection. Silver hair, silver eyes, ageless face that could have been 30 or 3,000. He watched Alara with the detached interest of a scientist observing an insect. The 5th throne representing House Corvus stood empty. Lucian Corvus, Lady Nocturne's voice echoed in the enclosed space. You stand accused of harboring a human with vampire ancestry, feeding from her repeatedly, and establishing a blood bond in potential violation of transformation protocols. How do you answer? Lucian stepped forward, and Alara felt his absolute control slam into place through their bond. Centuries of practiced composure, emotion locked behind impenetrable walls. I answer that I have broken no house law. The human came to my territory, wounded and dying. I saved her life in accordance with territorial protection rights. I feed from her with her explicit consent, taking only what is freely offered. And the blood bond is a natural consequence of compatible blood, not a deliberate transformation attempt. Yet you do not deny the bond exists, Lord Valmont said smoothly. A bond that makes her more susceptible to transformation, more bound to your will, more convenient, should you decide to create a new vampire without council approval. I deny the implication. Lucian's voice remained level. Miss Ashford's will is entirely her own. Then let us test that claim. Lady Sanguine leaned forward, her interest sharpening. Bring the human forward. Let us see what she truly desires. Alara's heart hammered, but she stepped forward as Lucian had instructed. 3 paces behind him, head high, showing deference without submission. She wore a gown Lucian had selected, deep green velvet, elegant but simple. Nothing that suggested she'd been dressed by a vampire trying to impress. State your name, Lady Nocturne commanded. Alara Ashford, formerly of Hampshire. Her voice remained steady. I come before the council as witness, not defendant. We determine what you are, Lord Valmont said coldly. Tell us, Miss Ashford, do you know what Lucian Corvus is? Yes, a vampire, 3rd of House Corvus. And do you understand that you are bound to him through blood? I do. Did you consent to this binding? I did. Freely and repeatedly. She met Valmont's silver eyes without flinching. Lord Corvus has never taken from me without asking, has never compelled me, has only protected me from those who would do me harm. Something flickered in Valmont's expression. Those who would do you harm? Do you refer to my house? I refer to the vampires who broke into Thornhaven and threatened my life. She kept her voice factual, not accusatory. Who told me Lord Valmont wanted me as leverage? Who would have kidnapped me had I not defended myself? A human defending herself against vampires. Lady Sanguine laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. How delightful. And how did you manage that? I threatened to kill myself before they could take me. Alara met her crimson gaze. I've spent my life being used as leverage by men who thought they owned me. I won't accept that fate again, even from immortals. Silence. The council members exchanged glances, some communication passing between them that Alara couldn't interpret. She has fire, Lady Sanguine observed. I like her. Your preferences are irrelevant, Lord Valmont snapped. The question is whether she acts of her own will, or whether Corvus has manipulated her into believing she does. Then test me. Ilara's words came before she could reconsider. You said you can read memories, see through compulsion. Do it. Look into my mind and see the truth. Ilara. No, Lucian started, but Lady Nocturne raised one hand. The human offers herself for examination. We accept. Those black eyes fixed on Ilara. Be warned, child. This will not be gentle. We will see everything. Every memory, every fear, every secret you've tried to hide. If you withdraw consent now, we will understand. Ilara's hands trembled, but she clasped them together. I don't withdraw consent. See what you need to see. Lady Nocturne stood, moving toward her with liquid grace. Then open your mind to us, and pray your will is as strong as you believe. Cold fingers touched Ilara's temples. The world exploded into fractured images. Her father's death, the creditors taking everything, her stepmother's cruelty, the years of isolation and calculated neglect. Lord Pemberton's wet lips on her hand, his whispered promises of what he'd do to her on their wedding night, the terror of running, the certainty that death was preferable to that cage. Then Lucian, his voice in the forest, decide quickly, his cold precision saving her life, the strange safety of Thornhaven, conversations in the gallery, his confession about Catherine, the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle worth solving, not property to possess, the blood bond forming warmth and connection she'd never experienced, the choice to save him, to offer her blood, to stand beside him against impossible odds. Through it all, one truth burned clear: every choice had been hers, every decision made freely, no compulsion, no manipulation, just two wounded souls finding something unexpected in each other. Lady Nocturne withdrew her hand, and Ilara collapsed. Lucian caught her instantly, and the bond between them blazed: his terror for her safety, his fury at having to watch her suffer, his desperate wish that he could have protected her from this. Well? Lord Valmont demanded. What did you find? Lady Nocturne returned to her throne. I found a human woman who has suffered considerably at the hands of her own kind, who chose survival over surrender, who sees Lucian Corvus clearly monster and man both and has decided he is worth trusting. She settled into her seat. I find no evidence of compulsion. Her will is entirely her own. Agreed, Lady Sanguine said immediately. She burns too brightly to be manipulated. Lord Ashencroft spoke for the first time, his voice like wind through a crypt. No compulsion detected. 3 votes. Ilara felt Lucian's relief flood the bond. Lord Valmont's expression darkened. This changes nothing. The blood bond still exists. She is still marked for potential transformation, which is not illegal, Lady Nocturne said coolly. Unless transformation occurs without consent. Has Miss Ashford consented to become vampire? No, Ilara said firmly. I have not. And do you intend to offer such consent? The question hung in the chamber. Through the bond, she felt Lucian holding his breath figuratively, since he didn't breathe. This was the moment, the choice that would determine everything. I don't know, Ilara answered honestly. Right now, I'm mortal, and wish to remain so. But if someday I choose differently, if I choose transformation of my own free will, that's my decision to make. Not yours, not even Lucian's, mine alone. Lady Sanguine smiled. Well said. Then the council finds no violation, Lady Nocturne declared. Lucian Corvus is cleared of harboring charges. However, her black eyes fixed on Valmont. The blood trial challenge stands. Lord Valmont, you have formally challenged House Corvus for territorial control. Do you withdraw your challenge? I do not. Then blood trial will proceed. 7 nights hence, at neutral ground. Single combat to the death. Lady Nocturne's gaze moved to Lucian. Prepare yourself, Corvus. This will not end cleanly. The chamber dissolved. Ilara found herself back in Thornhaven's cellar, still held in Lucian's arms. He was shaking, actually shaking, his legendary control shattered. You offered yourself to their scrutiny, he whispered. Do you have any idea what they could have done to your mind? Yes, and I did it anyway. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Because we needed them to see the truth. Because I needed you to see it too. See what? That I choose you. Not because you've manipulated me. Not because I'm running from something worse. But because you, Lucian Corvus, vampire and man, are worth choosing. She smiled despite her exhaustion. Now you just have to survive the blood trial so we can figure out what comes next. His laugh was broken, almost human. You make it sound simple. It's not. But we've survived everything else. She pressed her forehead to his. We'll survive this too. Together. Together, he echoed. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I love you, Alara Ashford. Mortal, impossible, magnificent woman. I love you. The words settled into her bones, into the blood bond, into the space between heartbeat and eternity. I love you too, she whispered. Monster, man, and everything in between. In 7 nights, he would fight for his life, for his territory, for their future. But tonight, in the darkness of Thornhaven's depths, mortal and immortal held each other, and chose, against all odds and all wisdom, to hope.